I swear that night started off normal. I met Halima at this new Pakistani place downtown. Kind of dim lighting, gold accents on the walls, the kind of spot that makes you think you're about to have a solid night. She looked great, way better than her pictures, and I remember thinking this could actually go somewhere. She had that quiet confidence, the kind that makes you lean in a little when she talks. We ordered kebabs and biryani, started with some small talk, just regular stuff about work and what we do for fun. Nothing weird yet. Halfway through the meal, things started to feel off. She kept glancing over my shoulder every few minutes, like she was watching something behind me. At first, I thought maybe she was just distracted or maybe recognized someone. Then her phone buzzed on the table, and she looked at it like it said something she didn't want me to see. She smiled, kind of awkwardly, and said she had to tell me something before it got too late. I thought she was about to say she wasn't feeling it or that she had to leave early. Instead, she leaned closer, lowered her voice, and told me her husband was sitting somewhere in the restaurant watching us. She said it so calmly I thought she was joking. I even laughed, but she didn't laugh back. She just looked at me and said they were trying something new. That's when it clicked she wasn't joking. My stomach dropped, and suddenly every guy in the restaurant felt suspicious. I asked which one was him, and she said it didn't matter, that he just wanted to see how she connected with someone else. She said it like she was explaining a science project. I looked around and spotted a guy sitting by himself near the back, facing us, pretending to scroll on his phone but barely blinking. I felt my throat go dry. From that point on, dinner was a mess. She acted totally normal, asking about my family, my weekend plans, like we didn't have a third person silently watching from across the room. Every time I looked up, that guy's eyes flicked between his phone and us. I tried to eat, but the food tasted like cardboard. My brain kept running through possible ways this could end badly. At one point, she excused herself to go to the bathroom, leaving her phone on the table. It buzzed again, and I saw the name him flash across the screen. Just him. No real name. The message preview said, "Stop touching your hair so much." That was it. I swear I wanted to walk out right there, but I didn't want to make a scene. The guy in the back was staring full on now, not even pretending anymore. When Halima came back, I asked her if this was a prank, like maybe they were making a YouTube video or something. She just smiled and said he was learning to trust again. That sentence stuck in my head because it sounded rehearsed, like she'd said it before to someone else. The waiter came to refill our drinks, and Halima asked for the check. I didn't even touch the last of my food. As we waited, she leaned in again and said her husband thought she'd cheated once before, and this was his idea of therapy. She said they'd made an agreement that if she could have dinner with someone and stay honest the whole time, maybe they could move forward. She told me I was part of the test. I couldn't process that. I just sat there, trying not to look behind me. When the bill came, she reached for it before I could, but the waiter said it was already paid for. By the man in the corner, he said, like it was the most normal thing ever. I turned my head, and the guy was already getting up, putting on his coat. He didn't look angry, just kind of satisfied, like he finished watching a movie that ended how he expected. Halima stood up and said she should go. She thanked me, said it wasn't personal, and walked out. I sat there like an idiot, the half-eaten food in front of me. Everyone else around still laughing, talking, having normal nights. I watched her meet the guy outside through the window. He didn't touch her or yell. They just stood there for a second before he motioned for her to follow him. Then they got into a black SUV and drove off. I didn't even realize the waiter was still standing there till he asked if everything was okay. I said yeah, but it wasn't. I sat there for maybe another 10 minutes trying to make sense of it. My phone buzzed then, an unknown number. It said, "You handled that well." That's it. No name. I left immediately after that. The street outside felt weirdly empty. I kept thinking about what she said, trying something new. What kind of couple does that? I checked my social media that night, paranoid they'd posted something, but nothing. No tags, no new followers. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I told a few friends, and they said it sounded like one of those loyalty test videos where some messed up couples experiment. But the message on my phone stayed in my head. You handled that well. I deleted it, but the number still sat in our recent text for weeks after. I thought about blocking it, but some part of me wanted to see if they'd message again. A week later, I went back to that restaurant during lunch just to prove to myself it was over. But the waiter recognized me. He asked if my friends were joining me again. That word, friends, threw me off. I said no, and he said, "That's good. That man creeped us out. He was here last night again alone." That's when I stopped going downtown for a while. I don't even use dating apps anymore. Anytime someone says they're into unconventional relationships, I swipe left instantly. But every so often, I check that block number just to see if anything new came through. Last week, there was a single unread message. It just said, "Ready for round 2." I didn't even want to go out that night. My cousin had been on my case about getting back out there, so I finally caved and matched with this guy named Chunide. His pictures looked clean cut, too clean maybe, like he ironed his shirt just to take a selfie. But he had a nice smile, and when he asked me to dinner, I figured whatever one night wouldn't kill me. He said he'd made a reservation at some fancy place I'd never heard of, one of those restaurants where they fold your napkin for you and every plate looks like a painting. I didn't know what to wear, so I went with something simple, jeans and a black top. He showed up in a blazer, and that alone made me feel underdressed, but he smiled and said I looked perfect. From the start, he was smooth. Too smooth. He complimented the waiter's timing, talked about how he liked supporting local chefs, and dropped random facts about wine that sounded rehearsed. I thought maybe he was just nervous. He suggested I try a drink called a black orchid or something. I'm not a big drinker, but it looked cool and he insisted, so I said sure. The first drink hit quick. I hadn't eaten much all day, so my head felt warm. He laughed a little when I said that, said we should order another before the food came out. I didn't think much of it. I mean, it's a date, people drink. But then he kept saying things like, "You've got to loosen up, right? And it's more fun when you're relaxed." By the third drink, I was starting to feel fuzzy. He, on the other hand, didn't look even slightly buzzed. I realized his glass was still half full. He'd been taking these tiny sips and mostly talking, keeping my attention. I asked him if he didn't want to finish his drink, and he said he was pacing himself. That's when my stomach twisted a little, but I ignored it. Dinner came, something with lamb, really fancy, cost like $60, but I barely tasted it. I was starting to feel dizzy, not drunk exactly, just off. Like the room was tilting slow. He started asking me weird questions, like if I'd ever dated anyone who drank too much or if I thought people acted more real when they were tipsy. He asked me to describe how I felt right now, like he was collecting data or something. At one point, he reached for his phone and tilted it slightly toward me. The camera was open. Not recording, just pointed in my direction. I tried to laugh it off. Said something like, "Don't film me. I look like a mess." But he said he wasn't recording, just checking the light. Something didn't feel right. My skin felt too warm, my thoughts came slow. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. My reflection looked fine, but I could tell in my eyes something was off. I splashed water on my face and stood there for a while, debating whether to just leave. When I got back, he was scrolling on his phone with a smug look. I sat down and asked if he was okay, trying to sound casual. He said he was great, that the experiment was going well. I laughed because I thought he was joking, but he looked dead serious. Then he leaned in a bit and said he was doing this social project where he went on dates with people, kept himself sober, and filmed the interaction to show how alcohol changes behavior. I felt my stomach drop. He said he'd already done it with a few people and posted the clips online. He said people loved watching how different people acted when they thought they were just having a normal date. My mind went blank for a second. I asked if he was recording me, and he said no, not exactly, but that he'd been keeping notes. He pointed toward his watch, one of those smart ones, and said it had voice capture built in. He said it like it was impressive. I just stared at him, trying to understand what kind of person does that. He said he'd edit out anything embarrassing and that it wasn't personal. He called it content. That word made me want to throw up. I reached for my phone, opened the camera, and aimed it at him. I said if he could film, so could I. He didn't like that. His whole attitude shifted. He leaned back, looked around the restaurant, and said I was overreacting. He even laughed a bit, said I was going to ruin the vibe. I told him to delete whatever he had recorded, but he said it wasn't possible because it's part of the series now. That's when I realized this wasn't some random idea. He planned it. The waiter came over, probably sensing the tension. I told him I wanted the bill separately. Junaid looked annoyed, but didn't stop me. He didn't even argue when the check came. I paid and walked out fast, my heart racing. Outside, I'd opened my phone and typed his name into TikTok. Sure enough, he had an account, thousands of followers. His page was full of social experiments, all titled like Drunk Date Ep. 1. Honesty under wine, how they change. And there I was. A clip had gone up that night, only a few minutes old. You could see my face, blurred but recognizable if you knew me. The caption said, "She's already on her third drink." The comments were disgusting, people laughing, guessing what I'd say next, calling me names. My chest felt tight. I reported it immediately, but it didn't matter. The video had already been downloaded and shared. Within hours, people were tagging it on other pages, talking about the drunk girl. I didn't even know what else he recorded. I tried messaging him, told him to take it down, but he blocked me. The next morning, a friend texted me asking if that was me in the video. That's when I realized it had spread way beyond his page. It was everywhere. I called the restaurant, told them what happened. The manager said they'd seen him filming before and had warned him about it, but he always said it was for a documentary. They hadn't stopped him because he never caused trouble. I asked if they had security footage from that night, but they said they could only release it with police involvement. So I went to the police. The officer listened, but it didn't sound like much to him. He said unless I could prove he recorded without consent in a private space, it would be hard to pursue. He gave me a report number and told me to contact a lawyer. Over the next few days, I started getting messages from random accounts. Some were just laughing emojis. Some said worse things. I deleted every app for a while, but even after a month, the clip was still floating around. People had stitched it, made memes out of it. I thought about confronting him in person, but that felt stupid. He'd probably just record that too. I did find out he'd moved on to another city, kept doing the same thing. Every week, a new episode. Different girl, same setup. Always drinks, always him sober, always the same fake charm. I remember one night I couldn't sleep, so I scrolled through his newer videos. There was a moment, tiny but there, where I saw him look straight into the camera before the date showed up. He smiled and said, "Let's see who she really is." The way he said it didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like he believed he was doing something important, like he thought he was exposing people. Months later, one of his videos got taken down because someone recognized the girl and threatened to sue. But he just made another account. Same content, same following. I blocked every version of his name I could find, but sometimes clips still show up on random pages. I scroll past fast, but sometimes I see familiar places. Last week, someone sent me a link, a new series titled Second Chances. The thumbnail was my face, blurred again but clearly me from that same night. He'd uploaded the full video, not just clips. It had over 1 million views before I could even get it reported. I tried not to watch it, but curiosity got me. It was worse than I expected. Every laugh, every pause, every glance looked like something else with his commentary layered over it. He talked like he was analyzing me, like I was a subject in a lab. He even said my name. That's when I realized what he meant when he said it wasn't personal. It was never about me. It was about him and whatever twisted sense of control he had from turning other people into footage. The last time I checked, the video was still up under a different title. I stopped reporting it. I just don't look anymore. But sometimes when I'm scrolling late at night, I'll see another one of his clips, and for a second, I swear I hear my own voice in the background. The night started out rough before it even began. The Uber driver got lost twice, my phone battery was dying, and I was already thinking about bailing before I even got to the restaurant. Then Lisa texted saying she'd be a bit late. I almost turned around right there, but I figured I'd come this far, might as well see it through. The restaurant was one of those mid-range Italian spots, not too fancy, but not a cheap pizza joint either. Soft music, candles, people laughing like they'd known each other forever. I sat at a table by the window, pretending to scroll while the waitress came by twice asking if I wanted to order something. Lisa was 25 minutes late when she finally showed up. She looked flustered, hair a little messy, like she'd just run out of a building. She apologized, smiled, and said traffic was insane. I didn't buy it, but didn't press. She sat down, ordered water right away, and said she was starving. I tried to lighten the mood, made a joke about her dramatic entrance, and she laughed, but it sounded forced. There was something about the way she kept checking her phone that threw me off. Every few minutes, the screen lit up, and she'd glance at it without unlocking it. We ordered pasta and a bottle of wine. I figured it might loosen the tension. She talked about work a bit, how she was tired of her job, how she wanted to travel more. I was trying to keep up, but I could tell her head wasn't really there. Halfway through her second glass, she sighed and said there was something she needed to tell me. I thought maybe she was about to say she wasn't feeling it, and honestly, I would have respected that. But instead, she said she'd just come from her boyfriend's apartment. I blinked, thinking I misheard her. She repeated it, slower this time, like she was testing how it sounded out loud. She said they'd been together for 3 years, but things had been bad lately. Then she said she wasn't sure if she wanted to end it or not, that she thought going on a date might give her clarity. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, completely thrown off. She said it like she was explaining a small detail, not like she just dropped a bomb. She said he didn't know she was out with someone, that he thought she was with friends. I didn't even know how to react. I wanted to get up and leave, but something about how calm she was kept me sitting there. I asked if this was normal for her, and she said no, that she'd never done anything like this before. Then she laughed quietly and said she wasn't even sure she was supposed to be there. She looked down at her plate for a long time, like she was somewhere else. The wine kept coming, and I tried to switch the topic, but everything circled back to him. His name, how they met, how he used to surprise her with flowers, how lately he'd become distant. She talked about the fights, the silence, the breaks. I started to feel like I was just sitting in on someone else's therapy session. Then she told me something that made me lose my appetite. She said she'd left his apartment that night after they fought. He told her not to go, that he wanted to talk, but she walked out. She said he texted her 5 times since she sat down with me. She showed me the screen for a second, 5 unread messages, all from him. The last one said, "If you walk away now, don't come back." She didn't look scared, just kind of sad. She said she didn't know if he meant it. I didn't know what to say. Every instinct in me wanted to end the date right there, but she looked fragile in a way that made me hesitate. The food arrived, but neither of us ate much. She picked at her plate, said she wasn't hungry anymore. Then she asked me what I'd do if someone couldn't let go of me. I said I'd take that as a bad sign, that people need space sometimes. She smiled faintly and said he used to say the same thing before things got bad. She started scrolling through her phone, showing me pictures of them together. Vacations, birthdays, random mirror selfies. She said she read them sometimes when she couldn't sleep. I noticed her hand shaking just a little when she swiped through. Out of nowhere, her phone buzzed again, but this time she didn't look. She put it face down and said she didn't want to ruin the night, but I could tell her eyes kept flicking toward it. A few minutes later, it buzzed again. I could feel the tension building. She finally looked, sighed, and whispered, "He's here." I froze. I asked what she meant, and she said he texted saying he saw her car outside. My heart started pounding. I looked toward the front door and saw a guy standing just outside the window, looking around like he was searching for someone. He wasn't trying to hide it either. He just stood there, eyes scanning the tables. I told her maybe we should leave, and she said no, he wouldn't do anything. She looked calm again, which was somehow worse. The guy outside spotted us, and his expression changed completely. He started walking toward the door. I told her I didn't want to be part of this. She said it'd be fine, that he just wanted to talk. The door opened, and the guy walked straight to our table. I could feel everyone in the restaurant turn to look. He didn't yell, didn't make a scene. He just stood there staring at her. She said his name quietly, like a kid getting caught doing something wrong. He looked at me next, like he was trying to figure out who I was. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile, more like he knew something I didn't. He said, "Enjoying your date?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her, waiting for her to say something. She said she was sorry that this wasn't what it looked like. He didn't say anything else. He just nodded, turned around, and walked out. She sat there frozen. I asked if she wanted me to call someone, but she said no, that she'd handle it. She looked like she was about to cry, but didn't. I paid the bill and told her I was leaving. She didn't stop me. When I got outside, I saw him sitting in a car across the street, headlights off. I didn't make eye contact, just walked fast and called another Uber. The ride home felt like hours. My phone buzzed once, unknown number. It was just a single message. "Did she tell you everything?" I blocked it. 2 days later, I read a post online about a couple who'd been in an argument outside the same restaurant. Someone had recorded it. The girl in the video looked like Lisa. It said she was trying to get in her car, and the guy was standing in front of it. The video ended before anything else happened. The comments said police were called, but no one knew what came next. I tried messaging her after that, just to see if she was okay, but her profile was gone. Deleted. I asked around on the app, found one person who said she unmatched with them that same night. It was like she disappeared. A week later, I went back to the restaurant for lunch, figuring it helped shake the weird feeling. A hostess recognized me, said she remembered me from that night. I asked what happened after I left. She said the girl had stayed a while, just sitting there, then went outside and got into a car. But it wasn't the same car she came in. She said the guy came back inside a few minutes later, asked if she'd left anything behind. He even left a tip for both meals, exact cash minus $52. I walked out without saying anything. That night, I got another text. No name, no context. Just said she wanted to say thanks for the company. I deleted it and turned off my phone. But every time I pass that restaurant now, I look at the window seat where we sat and wonder if she ever figured out what she wanted, or if someone else decided for her.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
I didn't expect much from Brad. His profile was plain, no filters, no shirtless selfies, just a couple of pictures of him with coffee and one blurry one of him at what looked like a film set. His bio said something like writer, observer, storyteller. I almost swiped left, but boredom won. He messaged within minutes, said he liked my energy, even though all I'd posted was one photo of me eating tacos. He asked me out the same night, said he had creative plans for the weekend. That should have been a red flag, but it sounded interesting. We met at a diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the 80s, neon signs, squeaky boots, and that smell of coffee and fryer oil that somehow makes you feel like you're in a movie yourself. He was already there when I arrived, typing something into a small notebook with a pen. He looked up and smiled, waved me over like we'd met before. He stood to greet me, all polite and proper, then said I looked exactly like he pictured. I didn't know what that meant, but I laughed it off. He said he came there often because he liked the energy of real people. He said it like a line from a documentary. We ordered burgers and milkshakes, mine chocolate, his vanilla, and the first 10 minutes were fine. He talked a lot, mostly about film stuff, how he wanted to make something that felt raw and honest, how modern movies lacked truth. He said truth like it was a religion. Then he started writing again while I talked, just small notes here and there. At first, I thought he was jotting ideas, maybe a reminder. But then he'd pause, look at me for a few seconds, and write more. I finally asked what he was doing, and he said he was capturing dialogue. I laughed because it sounded ridiculous, but he didn't laugh back. He said he liked to base his characters on real people. That conversation on a first date was pure, unfiltered. I didn't know what to say. I asked if he was seriously writing what I said, and he nodded like it was the most normal thing in the world. He said he'd been doing it for a while, and that I talked like someone who'd make a good scene. That made my stomach tighten a little. He told me about his project, how he wanted to write a screenplay that felt like eavesdropping on real life. He said he'd already met with a few people who didn't work out because they performed too much. He said I didn't do that. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. He started asking me oddly specific questions, like how I felt when I first realized someone liked me, or how I handled being ignored, or what I thought people feared most about being alone. I tried to joke my way through it, but he wrote down every word I said. He didn't even hide it. The waitress came to refill our drinks, and he looked up at her with that same intense focus. He wrote something again right after she left. I peeked over, and I swear I saw him write, "She doesn't like the waitress." I asked what that was about, and he said, "It's not about you exactly. It's about the character you're becoming." That line gave me chills. He started describing scenes he'd written, two strangers meeting, their conversations slowly revealing things about who they were. He said the best writing happened when you didn't know which parts were real. He told me he liked watching people talk when they didn't realize they were saying something important. He asked if I'd ever felt like someone was writing my life without me knowing. I said no, and he smiled, said that was exactly what most people would say. At that point, I was trying to steer things back to normal music, movies, anything that didn't sound like therapy disguised as art. Every time I said something, his pen moved. I asked if I could see what he was writing, and he said no, not yet, that it wasn't ready. He said if I saw it now, it'd break the spell. The food arrived. He barely touched his burger, just kept staring at me like he was waiting for something. When I finally asked what he was looking at, he said he was trying to memorize my expressions so he could describe them accurately later. I told him that was creepy. He apologized, kind of, said he didn't mean it that way. But then he said he'd never had someone call him creepy before and asked if he could use that line. I said, whatever, sure, and he grinned like he just scored something valuable. The night dragged on. I kept checking the time, but he didn't seem in any hurry. He said real moments can't be rushed. I told him I had to leave soon, and he said he needed one last thing. He asked me to say something real, something I never told anyone. I said no. He said it didn't have to be dark, just honest. I asked why it mattered, and he said it would make the ending better. That's when I realized he'd already decided this was part of his script. I wasn't a date, I was a scene. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. He asked if he could walk me out, but I said no. He didn't look angry, just curious, like he was still observing. As I walked to the door, I heard his pen scratching again. Outside, I took a breath of cold air and started walking fast. My phone buzzed. A message from him already. You walked out at the perfect time. It makes the story better. I blocked his number that night. 2 days later, a friend sent me a link to a local short film showcase on YouTube. I clicked, not expecting anything, but there it was. A short called Dinner with a Stranger, same diner, same setup. The girl looked eerily like me, different face, but same clothes, same lines I read that night. Even some of the pauses were identical. The guy in the film was clearly based on Brad. He cast himself. He even used our table, same booth by the window. I watched, my stomach turning, as the fake version of me smiled, laughed, then looked uncomfortable. The last line of the film was, "You walked out at the perfect time." It had thousands of views already. People in the comments were calling it realistic and authentic. Someone asked if it was based on a true story, and he replied, "Everything I write is." I tried messaging him again on a different account, telling him to take it down, but he ignored me. I reported it, but it didn't matter. It was still there, and people were quoting it like it was art. Weeks went by. I started seeing his name pop up in more places, film festivals, online interviews. In one clip, he talked about how he found inspiration from real-life connections. He said he liked turning awkwardness into honesty. When the interviewer asked if the people knew he was writing about them, he smiled and said, "Some figure it out eventually." One night, I drove past that same diner out of curiosity. It was nearly empty, just a few people at the counter. And there he was, same booth, notebook open, pen in hand, watching, writing. I didn't go inside. A few months later, I saw a teaser for another short on his page. The title was The One Who Walked Out. The thumbnail showed a girl's hand on a doorknob. Same outfit I wore that night. Same ring. I didn't even click it. I've stopped going on dates to places with booths or mood lighting. Sometimes when I'm out, I'll see someone jotting in a notebook, and I get this instant urge to leave. I don't even like telling stories about that night anymore because somehow it still feels like he's writing it down somewhere, adding it to his universe. I don't think he's dangerous exactly. He's just the kind of person who believes everything is worth turning into a story, even if it means you don't get to own your own. I met Maya at a housewarming party a friend threw for his cousin. She wasn't even supposed to be there. She tagged along with someone else. Showed up in this oversized hoodie with her hair tied up like she just rolled out of bed. I don't know why, but that made her stand out more than anyone else there. She wasn't trying. Everyone else was dressed up, and she just looked like she didn't care and somehow still pulled it off. We started talking near the kitchen counter, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and half-drunk cans of beer. She told me she used to be a chef but was taking a break. I asked from what, and she said from everything. I laughed, thinking she was being funny, but she didn't laugh back. A few days later, she messaged me and said she wanted to cook dinner for me instead of going out. I hesitated, but she said, "My food will change your life." She sounded confident, so I agreed. She gave me her address, a small place near the edge of town, older neighborhood, quiet streets with big trees hanging over them. When I showed up, it smelled amazing. Garlic, something sweet, something spicy. She opened the door barefoot, hair messy again, but she had this energy like she'd been in her element all day. The table was already set. 2 plates, candles, music low in the background. I remember thinking this was too good to be true. She poured me wine, said to sit and relax while she finished up. I watched her move around the kitchen. Everything was organized but messy at the same time. Ingredients scattered, spices open, handwritten notes taped on the cabinets. I asked where she'd learned to cook like that, and she said, where I used to work. Then she added, before they banned me. I thought she was joking, so I laughed, but she just shrugged. She said she worked at a restaurant downtown, a fancy one with no menu, chef's choice only. I'd actually heard of the place. It was the kind of spot people booked months in advance and paid like $300 a head. I asked why she got banned, and she said they didn't like her experiments. That word didn't sit right with me, but the food smelled too good to care. She served the first course, a soup that looked simple but tasted unreal. Creamy, a little smoky, like it had something I couldn't quite identify. She watched me take the first bite, smiling like she was testing something. I said it was incredible, and she grinned and said, "That's how it starts." When I asked what she meant, she said she believed food should make you feel something beyond taste. That people forgot that meals could have memory in them. She said she learned how to do that from her old boss, but took it further. I didn't fully get it, but I nodded along. She brought out the main dish next, some kind of pasta with shredded chicken, and this deep, rich sauce that smelled like smoke and herbs. Halfway through eating, I noticed the flavor changed a little. The same dish, but it started tasting slightly different, almost metallic, but not bad. She asked how it was, and I said it was incredible again, though my tongue felt slightly numb. She said she was glad because the ingredients were hard to get. I asked where she bought them, and she said she didn't buy them, she collected them. Then she laughed and said not to look so serious, but the way she said it made it hard to tell if she was joking. She started talking about her old job again, how the restaurant didn't appreciate her creativity. She said she once added something to a dish that wasn't on the inventory list, and that night 3 guests complained of feeling weird after eating it. She said it wasn't food poisoning, just heightened sensitivity. She sounded proud of it, like she discovered something. I put my fork down for a second. I asked if what we were eating now was safe. She said of course it was. And she leaned forward and said, "But you can taste it, can't you? The difference." I didn't know what she wanted me to say, so I nodded. She smiled like that confirmed something. After dinner, she poured more wine and started cleaning up, humming to herself. I offered to help, but she said no, that she liked the ritual of closing the kitchen. She had these glass jars on the counter, all labeled in messy handwriting. Things like smoked memory, silent heat, joy mix. None of them made sense. She caught me looking and said those were her blends. She said every jar had something she'd made herself, and that each one was linked to a place or a person. I asked what that meant, and she said I'd understand if I came over again. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at it, frowned, and silenced it. I didn't think much of it, but she got tense. I asked if everything was okay, and she said it was just her ex-boss being dramatic. She told me that after she left the restaurant, they accused her of stealing ingredients. I asked if she did, and she said, technically. She said they threw her out and banned her for life, said she'd never cook professionally again. But then she smiled and said she still had her sources. When I left that night, she gave me a jar to take home. It was small, sealed tight, labeled sweet smoke. She said to open it the next time I missed her cooking. I laughed awkwardly, thanked her, and left it on my kitchen counter when I got home. The next day, I had a message from her, just a picture of a dish that looked like what we ate, with a caption, "Round 2 soon." I said sure, even though something about her still made me uneasy. 2 nights later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was a guy from the restaurant she used to work at. He said he found my number on her recent message list. They must have still had her contact info somehow. He asked if I'd eaten at her place recently. I said yes, and he told me not to eat anything else she gave me. He said they'd been trying to track down some of their missing ingredients because they contained compounds that weren't meant for home use. I asked what he meant, but he wouldn't say. Just told me to throw out whatever she gave me. I hung up and went straight to the counter, grabbed that little jar. It didn't look dangerous, just smelled sweet, smoky, almost addictive. I hesitated, but then I remembered that numb feeling on my tongue and dumped it in the trash. The next morning, I checked the trash can, and the jar was gone. Not broken, just gone. I texted Maya, asked if she'd stopped by, but she didn't reply. Her messages stopped showing and delivered after that. About a week later, I drove past her street. Her windows were dark, curtains drawn. I knocked, but no answer. The neighbor came out and said she hadn't seen Maya for days. Said there'd been a weird smell a few nights before, but it went away. Months later, I went to that restaurant downtown, the one she said banned her. It was still open, packed as always. I mentioned her name to the waiter just casually, and he froze. He said quietly that I should probably leave it alone. When I insisted, he said she'd come back once, late one night, begging to see her old station in the kitchen. The manager had called the police because she refused to leave. Before they arrived, she ran out, but the next morning they found half the pantry emptied. He said they still don't know what she took. I tried searching her name online. Nothing. No social media, no mentions. It was like she never existed. The weirdest part came a month later. I was at a friend's place for dinner, and one of them had ordered catering from some pop-up chef. When the food arrived, the smell hit me instantly, sweet and smoky, the same way her kitchen smelled. The containers had plain white labels, but on the corner of one, written in pen, were two words, sweet smoke. I met Connor at the gym, not in some romantic way. He just asked if I was done using the bench, and we ended up talking after. He had that calm, confident vibe, not overly friendly but kind of magnetic. He mentioned he was into long drives and deep talks, which sounded cliche but harmless. After a few run-ins, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. I said sure. The day before the date, he texted asking if I'd rather skip the coffee and go somewhere quiet. I figured he meant a park or a lookout, something like that. He said he'd pick me up, and I agreed, though now I wish I hadn't. He pulled up right on time, driving this old silver sedan that looked clean, but clearly had some years on it. The seats smelled like pine air freshener, and there was a single water bottle in the cup holder, his not new. He played soft music, nothing mainstream, just some low instrumental stuff. I tried making small talk, but he was focused on the road, smiling occasionally like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. He drove out of the city, toward this stretch of road lined with trees. No streetlights, no houses. The kind of place you'd only go if you knew exactly where you were headed. I asked where we were going, and he said, just somewhere peaceful. He sounded calm, so I didn't push. After about 20 minutes, he turned off onto a smaller road that looked like it led into a park. It was empty, just gravel crunching under the tires and the sound of cicadas. He parked near a clearing with a lake down below. It would have been pretty if the vibe wasn't so weird. He killed the engine, turned out the headlights, and leaned back in his seat. Then he said something that instantly put me on edge. I like talking without distractions. I nodded slowly, figuring he just meant no phones. Then he reached over, took my phone from my lap, and pressed the power button until it shut off. I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he didn't hand it back. He put it in the glove compartment and closed it. I told him that wasn't cool, but he said, "You'll get it back. I just want to be sure you're really here." It was dark now except for the moonlight. I could hear frogs somewhere in the distance, the wind rustling through the trees. I tried to stay calm, asked him what he wanted to talk about. He said he wanted to get to know who I am when I'm not plugged in. I said fine, and we talked a bit about random things, family, work, music. He asked questions like he was interviewing me. Every time I gave an answer, he waited a few seconds before responding like he was studying me. Then he asked if I ever felt like people only existed when someone else was watching them. I said no, not really. He smiled, like that confirmed something for him. He said most people don't realize how loud they are when they have their phones around, that they stop being real. The conversation went on for a while, but I couldn't shake the unease. I asked if we could go somewhere else mid he grabbed food. He said not yet. I reached for the door handle, but it didn't budge. It was locked. I asked him to unlock it, and he said, "I will, when we're done." I tried to keep my voice steady. I told him I didn't think this was funny. He looked at me, totally calm, and said he wasn't trying to be funny. He said he just wanted to connect for real. He started talking about how people never listen anymore, how everyone's addicted to noise. He said he used to date someone who couldn't go 5 minutes without checking her phone, and that one night he'd taken it from her so they could focus. He said that's when he realized silence shows who people really are. I asked again for him to unlock the door. He didn't answer, just looked at me for a long time, then said softly, "You don't trust easily, do you?" I said no, not when someone locks me in their car. He didn't react, just stared out the windshield at the lake. After a while, he started asking strange questions, like if I believed people could know each other without words. I said no, and he shook his head like that was the wrong answer. Then he asked if I'd ever sat in total darkness before. I said I hadn't. He said I should try it. He turned off the interior light, the dashboard light, everything. We were sitting in pitch black. I could hear my own heartbeat. I thought about reaching for the door handle again, but I couldn't even see it. Then he whispered, "Most people can't handle silence. It exposes them." That's when I decided I wasn't waiting anymore. I reached for the glove compartment, trying to grab my phone. He caught my wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to make my chest tighten. He said, "You'll ruin it if you rush." I said I didn't care and told him to let me out. He stared at me, then finally sighed and pressed the unlock button. The click of the doors unlocking felt like air coming back into the car. I opened the door and stepped out, my hands shaking. The night was cold, the ground uneven. I backed away from the car, trying to sound calm as I said I was calling a ride home. He rolled down his window and said, "There's no signal out here." I turned my phone back on, and sure enough, no bars. He watched me for a few seconds, then said, "You can get in, and I'll drive you back." I didn't move. He leaned out the window, voice still calm, said, "You don't have to be scared. I just wanted to see what kind of person you are when things get quiet." I told him I'd walk. He shrugged, started the car, and said, "Suit yourself." Then he drove off slowly, headlights fading into the trees. I stood there for a while, trying to figure out which way we'd come from. The road curved, and there were no signs. I started walking, hoping to find cell service. After maybe 10 minutes, I saw headlights again behind me. I thought it was him coming back, and my stomach dropped. But it was another car, a park ranger. He asked what I was doing out there alone. I told him everything, or at least a short version. He said that park had been closed for months due to some maintenance and that no one should have been driving down that road. He gave me a ride back to the main road, and I caught an Uber home from there. When I got back, I checked Connor's number. It was gone, like he deleted the chat. His profile on the dating app was gone too. The next day, I told a friend what happened. She said she thought she knew who I meant. Apparently, she'd seen posts in a local Facebook group about a guy who did the same thing, invited girls out to talk, and took them somewhere remote. One person said he called it his quiet test. I went back to that group later, tried to find the posts, but they were deleted. I searched his name online. Nothing. Just one old account with a single photo of a car parked near a lake. Weeks passed, and I started going back to the gym again. One night, I was leaving, and I saw a sober sedan parked across the street. Same model, same shape. The headlights flashed once before it pulled away. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "You handled the silence better than most." The thing about dating apps is you get numb after a while. Same faces, same fake laughs, same "I love hiking" bios from people who probably haven't been outside since high school. So when Amy messaged me first, it caught my attention. She wasn't trying too hard. Her profile said, "I like weird stories and late dinners." That sounded chill enough. She picked the place. Some little restaurant tucked behind a bookstore, barely any lights, just candles and low music. It felt kind of secret, like a place only people in the know went to. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting by the window, smiling like she'd been waiting. She had this soft voice and the kind of calm that makes you think she's got everything figured out. We ordered pasta and wine. She asked a lot of questions about family, what I do, stuff like that, but it didn't feel like an interrogation. She listened in this weird focused way, like she was collecting each word and storing it somewhere. Everything was smooth until halfway through dinner. She was twirling her wine glass, looking at the candle flame, when she suddenly said, "My ex went missing 2 weeks ago." Just like that. No build-up. I froze, waiting for her to laugh or say she was kidding, but she didn't. She just kept looking at the candle like it was normal conversation. I asked if she meant missing as in left town or missing as in police involved. She said the police had been asking her questions every few days. I didn't know what to say, so I asked how she was doing with it. She smiled again, same calm smile, and said she was fine now. She told me his name was Dylan. They dated for almost 2 years, broke up 3 months before he disappeared. Apparently, he'd been texting her right up until a week before he vanished. She said she didn't respond much because it was better to keep boundaries. Then she said, "They think I know more than I do." Her tone was casual, like she was talking about parking tickets. I laughed nervously, thinking maybe she just had a dark sense of humor, but her expression didn't change. She said the cops kept showing up at her place, asking about their last argument, where she was that night, all of it. She said she told them the truth. She'd been home alone, watching a movie. She said they didn't believe her because Dylan's phone had pinged near her building the night he disappeared. She said she didn't even know he was in the area. The way she talked about it made my stomach twist. She wasn't scared or angry, just matter of fact. She said people vanish all the time, but everyone needs someone to blame. Then she looked at me straight on for the first time and said, "Do you think it's weird that I still have this stuff?" I said, "No, not really. Breakups are messy. People keep things." She nodded like she was testing how I'd respond. She said she had a few of his things at her apartment: shirts, books, a watch he left behind. She said she couldn't bring herself to throw them out. I tried to change the topic, but she brought him up again, talking about how he used to love pasta like the one we were eating. Then she laughed quietly and said, "I guess he doesn't eat anything now." I froze again. She noticed and said, "Sorry, bad joke." We finished eating, and she suggested getting dessert. I almost said no, but something about her was hypnotic. I didn't want to leave without figuring her out. She ordered tiramisu, and I swear she looked happy for the first time all night, like sugar made her forget everything. When we were leaving, she said she lived nearby and asked if I wanted to walk her home. I hesitated but said okay. The streets were empty, just a few street lights, and the sound of our shoes on the pavement. She talked about how peaceful nighttime was, how it made her feel invisible. Her building was small and old, with one of those metal gates you have to buzz open. She said, "You can come up for a minute if you want to see something." I almost said no again, but followed her inside. Her apartment was spotless. Everything looked arranged like a photo: plants in perfect rows, candles, not a thing out of place. But what stood out were the boxes stacked near the wall. 5 or 6 of them, all labeled with names. One said Dylan. She saw me looking and said those were just storage boxes, that she liked keeping things organized. I nodded, pretending not to care, but the box with Dylan's name was open slightly. Inside, I saw a folded shirt, a watch, and what looked like a phone charger. She poured wine again, told me to sit. She said she liked having someone there who didn't ask dumb questions. I didn't know if that was a compliment or not. Then she asked me if I'd ever had someone disappear from my life suddenly. I said, yeah, sure, friends drift apart. She said, "No, I mean really disappear." Her tone changed, quieter, heavier. She said the weird part about Dylan was that she kept dreaming about him. In her dreams, he'd knock on her door, but never come inside. I tried to laugh it off, said maybe it was just her brain processing things, but she said, "No, it feels different." She said the police kept checking her building cameras, but they never found footage of him leaving, only arriving. She said the cameras in the hall had been broken that night. She took a sip of wine, looked straight at me, and said, "Sometimes I think he's still here." I tried to keep my face neutral. I asked if she meant in a ghost way, and she said, "Not exactly." Then she smiled, the same calm, eerie smile as before. I checked the time and said I should get going. She nodded, stood up, and said, "Take the elevator, not the stairs." I asked why, and she said, "The stairs creak too much. They always did." That sentence stuck in my head as I left. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The next day, curiosity got the better of me, and I searched her name online. There it was, an article about a man named Dylan Turner, missing for 2 weeks. Last seen near the same neighborhood she lived in. The article mentioned police were questioning an ex-girlfriend, but didn't name her. I didn't need to guess. I tried not to get paranoid, but I kept replaying her voice in my head saying, "Sometimes I think he's still here." A few nights later, she texted me, "Dinner again?" I didn't respond. She texted again an hour later, "I found something of his you should see." I blocked her number. 2 weeks passed, and I started feeling silly for being freaked out. Then one night, I was walking home from work and I saw her. She was standing across the street under a streetlight, holding a small box. She waved when our eyes met, then crossed over. She said she wanted to return something. I said I didn't want anything from her, but she pressed the box into my hands and said, "You should keep it. He would have liked that." And she walked away before I could say another word. I didn't open it until I got home. Inside was a silver watch, the same one I'd seen in the box labeled Dylan. There was a small note under it that said he'd like to know the time. I threw the box in the trash. The next morning I checked, and the box was gone. Not in the trash, not outside, just gone. A week later, I saw a new article. They'd found Dylan's car near a lake outside the city. His wallet was inside, but no sign of him. Police still had no leads. At the bottom of the article, there was a photo of people laying flowers near the lake. In the corner of the picture, half hidden behind a tree, was Amy, smiling. I didn't even want to go on that date. My friend basically forced me. She said I'd been single too long and that Tennyson seemed different. I didn't know what that meant, but I agreed just to shut her up. He picked the place, a quiet Thai restaurant downtown with wooden tables and soft lighting. It wasn't crowded, which I liked. When I got there, he was already seated near the back. He stood up when he saw me, smiled, and gave this little half wave that looked more awkward than charming. He looked clean, put together, kind of nerdy in a careful way. Button-up shirt, hair slicked back. I thought, okay, maybe this won't be so bad. As I got closer, I noticed someone sitting across from him. A woman around his age, probably late 20s. She looked like she'd been waiting for me too. I thought maybe it was a friend or a coworker. I smiled politely and said hi, expecting her to get up and leave, but she didn't. She just stared at me with this look that wasn't rude, but wasn't friendly either. Tennyson said, "Oh, this is my sister Clara. She's joining us tonight." I laughed because I thought he was joking. Who brings their sister on a first date? But when I looked at Clara again, she wasn't laughing. She said, "I like to meet the people my brother spends time with." That's when I realized it wasn't a joke. The waiter came by and handed us menus. Tennyson looked relaxed, like this was totally normal. Clara, on the other hand, was scanning me like she was trying to memorize my face. She didn't even open her menu. The first 10 minutes were fine, kind of small talk, what we did for work, how we met on the app, stuff like that. Then Clara started asking questions. Not casual ones either. She asked what my last relationship was like, why it ended, if I believed people can really change. I tried to laugh it off, but she wasn't smiling. Tennyson just kept eating like this was part of the plan. I looked at him for help, but he just said, "Clara's protective. She's got a good read on people." Clara leaned in then and said, "You'd be surprised how many liars you meet on dates." The way she said it made my skin crawl a little. I asked if she always came on her brother's dates, and she said only the important ones. I said this was our first date, and she smiled like that didn't matter. She said, "Sometimes you can tell right away if someone's worth it." The waiter brought our food, and for a second, the tension lifted. But then Clara started again. She asked what my parents did, if I had debt, how long I'd been single. She even asked how many people I'd dated from the app. It was like a job interview. Tennyson just sat there, occasionally chiming in with things like, "That's a fair question," or she asks everyone that. At one point, Clara pulled out a small notebook. I swear, she actually had notes. She said she liked keeping track of details for future reference. I asked what that meant, and she said, "You'd be surprised how often people contradict themselves later." I was halfway through my drink, and my brain was screaming at me to leave, but I didn't want to make a scene. I told Tennyson this felt weird, that maybe his sister could join another time. He said it was part of the process. I asked what process. He said they had a system. His sister meets anyone he's serious about, helps him filter out bad energy. He said it so casually, like everyone did this. Clara nodded and said it wasn't personal, that she just believed people show their true colors when questioned. She asked if I'd ever cheated on anyone. I said no. She watched my face carefully, then said, "You hesitated." I told her I didn't. She wrote something in her notebook. At that point, I turned to Tennyson and said I was leaving. He looked disappointed but not surprised. Clara said, "You should stay. You're doing fine," like it was a test I hadn't finished. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and said I didn't like being evaluated. Clara said, "That's what everyone says right before they fail." I didn't reply. I just walked out. As I reached the door, Tennyson called after me, said he'd walk me to my car. I told him not to bother. He came anyway, caught up to me outside, and said Clara's questions were just for fun. I told him fun doesn't usually involve interrogation. He looked genuinely confused. He said his sister had always been part of his dating life, that she helped him avoid bad matches. I said that sounded insane. He said he'll understand eventually. I drove home thinking that would be the end of it. The next day, I got a message from him. Clara liked you. She just had a few follow-up questions. I didn't reply. An hour later, Clara messaged me herself from a different number. You did better than most. Can we talk again? I blocked both of them. A few days later, a letter showed up at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a piece of paper that looked like a questionnaire. It had my name at the top and a list of questions. Things like, would you consider yourself loyal? What would you do if someone you cared about lied to you? How often do you talk to exes? At the bottom it said, please return to Clara. I threw it out immediately. A week passed and I thought it was over. Then one night I got home late and found an envelope slip under my door. Inside was a photo, me at the restaurant, sitting across from Tennyson and Clara. It was taken from a distance, probably another table. On the back of the photo, written in neat handwriting, was, evaluation pending. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went to the restaurant to ask if they had cameras or if someone might have taken the photo. The manager said no one there remembered seeing anyone with a camera that night, but he did say something strange. He said Tennyson and his sister were regulars. They'd been coming for over a year, always sitting at the same table, always with a different person across from them. He said it was always an interview dinner, his words, not mine. He said sometimes people left early, sometimes they stayed, but he never saw the same guest twice. I asked if anyone ever complained, and he said yes once. A woman had reported them for harassment, but when the police checked, Tennyson and Clara had moved to a new apartment and changed numbers. I tried searching their names online, but found almost nothing. The only thing that came up was an old LinkedIn page for Clara, last updated 5 years ago, and a forum post about a guy named Tennyson who brings his sister to dates for psychological screening. No one ever confirmed if it was real. 2 nights later, I heard a knock on my door. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there. But on the floor, there was another envelope. Inside was the same questionnaire, this time half filled out, with my handwriting, except I hadn't written any of it. At the bottom, in red ink, it said, approved for second evaluation. I packed a bag and stayed at my friend's place for a week after that. When I finally went back, my mailbox was empty except for one postcard. No return address. Just a single sentence written neatly across the back. Clara says you passed. I met Jamila through a friend who swore she was the chillest girl ever. I wasn't even looking for anything serious. I just wanted a normal dinner with someone who didn't make everything awkward. She picked the place, a new sushi spot that had just opened near the mall. I showed up early, figuring I'd grab a drink and scroll while waiting, but she was already there, sitting at the corner booth, scrolling on her phone. She looked up, smiled quick, then put the phone away. First impression, she was pretty, not in a fake or overdone way, just natural, effortless. She asked if I'd eaten there before, and I said no. She said it was probably a good thing. I laughed because I thought she was joking, but she didn't laugh back. She just nodded and said, you'll see. The waitress came, handed us menus, and asked if we wanted to start with drinks. I ordered water, she ordered nothing. Not even tea. When the waitress walked away, Jamila leaned in and said, I don't eat in restaurants anymore. I thought she meant like a diet thing, but she said no, not that. She said she used to work in one and that she knows what they do to food. I asked what she meant, and she said, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. I told her to try me. She smiled, looked around like she was checking for cameras, and said she worked in a restaurant for 5 years, started as a hostess, ended up in the kitchen. She said she quit after something happened. When I asked what, she said it was complicated, but it had to do with the head chef and what he used to feed people. At that point, I was starting to regret showing up, but curiosity kept me there. She said the chef had this obsession with perfection. Said he used to talk about how people don't deserve good food unless they respect it. She said he'd do weird things in the kitchen, mix sauces that weren't on the menu, swap ingredients, even save leftovers from VIP customers to use for energy. I said that sounded insane, and she nodded like I finally understood. She said one night she saw him take food off someone's plate after they left, scrape it into a jar, and label it with their name. I said that had to be illegal, but she said no one cared because the restaurant was high-end, the kind that charged $200 a meal. She said the staff all pretended not to notice because he paid them extra. I asked how she knew he was using it for anything weird, and she said she'd seen him mix it into sauces. Not all the time, just for special guests. She said he believed food carried energy, people's moods, their memories, and that if he blended those together, he could make the perfect dish. I told her that sounded like something out of a horror movie, and she said she read once that some cultures believe food holds memory, that when people eat together, they share something deeper than just taste. Then she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You've probably eaten someone else's leftovers before without knowing it." I tried to laugh it off, but her expression didn't change. She said that's why she doesn't eat at restaurants anymore. She only eats what she makes herself. The waitress came back, and I ordered sushi. Jamila said she'd just watch. The waitress gave her a weird look, but didn't ask questions. When the food came, she didn't touch a thing. She just watched me eat. It's hard to explain how weird that felt. Trying to act normal while someone stares at you like you're part of an experiment. Every time I took a bite, she studied my face. I asked if she wanted to try some, and she shook her head, said she was fine. Then she started asking questions. Not about me, about the food. What it tasted like, how it felt, if it reminded me of anything. I said it was good, and she said, "That's what they want you to think." She told me that when she quit, she tried reporting the chef, but no one believed her. She said the restaurant was too respected, that people called her bitter for getting fired. She said she wasn't fired, though. She left after the final straw. I asked what that was, and she said one night a regular customer ordered the special. When she served it, the man said it tasted familiar like something he'd had before. The chef overheard and smiled. Later that night, she saw him writing the man's name on a new jar. She said she didn't sleep for 3 days after that. I started to wonder if she was making it up, but she sounded too detailed, too serious. She said after she quit, she started researching what happens in kitchens when no one's watching. She said people think food safety laws mean something, but there are loopholes. You can put almost anything in a sauce, she said. Then she added quietly, "You ever feel dizzy after eating somewhere new?" I stopped chewing. She smiled, almost like she was joking, but her eyes stayed dead serious. She said she could always tell when food was tainted. She said she once dated a guy who cooked for her, and she knew right away he used something mold. She said she broke up with him the next day. I asked what she eats now, and she said mostly raw vegetables and things she grows herself. She said she doesn't trust store-bought stuff either because you don't know who touched it. The longer we talked, the more uncomfortable I got. She wasn't crazy exactly, she just believed everything she said. She talked like someone who'd seen too much and couldn't unsee it. When I finished eating, she looked at my plate and said, "You shouldn't have finished it." I asked why, and she said, "You'll see." She stood up, said she needed to go, and left cash on the table even though she didn't order anything. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to shake off the weird feeling. The food suddenly didn't sit right in my stomach. That night, around midnight, I started feeling nauseous. My head was pounding, my mouth dry. I figured maybe the sushi was bad. I ended up throwing up twice before falling asleep on the couch. When I woke up the next morning, there was a message from her. "How did you sleep?" I didn't reply. A few hours later, another one came through. "Told you not to finish it." I blocked her number immediately. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was the restaurant manager. He said someone had left a complaint card with my name on it. The note said, "Ask your chef where the fish came from." I asked what that was about, and the manager sounded confused. He said the fish supplier had changed recently, but everything was fine. That night, curiosity got to me. I looked at the restaurant online, checked reviews, and found a few recent ones mentioning food poisoning. Nothing major, but still strange. A week passed, and I started forgetting about it. Then one evening, I came home to find a small paper bag hanging on my door. Inside was a jar of something dark red, like sauce. No label, no note, just the smell of soy and something else I couldn't place. I threw it out right away. A few days later, I got another message, this time from a new number. It said, "You can't trust what's served to you." Then another one, a minute later, "But you can learn to cook." I deleted it and moved apartments a month later. Haven't eaten sushi since. You know those people who seem completely normal for the first 10 minutes and then start saying stuff that makes you question your whole night? That was Mike. I met him through a coworker who said he was different, but in a good way. I didn't ask what that meant because I figured everyone's a little weird. He picked a quiet diner near the edge of town for our date. Said he liked places where you could hear your own thoughts. When I got there, he was already sitting in a booth, but not facing the room like everyone else. He picked the seat facing the wall. The back of his head was toward everything else. When I walked up, he smiled, motioned for me to sit across from him, and said he'd already ordered coffee. I asked if he wanted to switch seats since I'd rather not stare at a blank wall all night, but he shook his head and said, "It's better this way." I figured he was just being quirky, so I sat down. The waitress came by, dropped off my water, and gave me a look like, "Good luck with this one." We started talking. He asked what I did for work, what music I liked, basic small talk. Everything felt fine, until he leaned forward a little and said, "I picked this table on purpose." I said okay, not sure what to do with that. He said, "I don't like when people sit behind me." I asked why, and he said he didn't trust people who can see you when you can't see them. I told him that was intense, and he said, "Not if you know what's out there." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he didn't laugh back. He said there are always people listening, that they record things, watch expressions, analyze patterns. I said, "Who's they?" And he said, "That depends on the night." At that point, I started to realize this wasn't going to be a regular dinner. The waitress came to take our order. He told her he wanted his burger plain, wrapped tight, and he made her repeat it twice. When she left, he said, "They'd mess with the food sometimes." I asked who, and he said, "The ones that listen." He kept talking in circles like that, never directly saying who he meant. He said people like me probably thought he was paranoid, but he wasn't wrong. He said he'd caught strangers taking photos of him before, even in grocery stores. I asked what he did about it, and he said he followed one of them once, just to see how far they'd go. He said the guy led him to a cafe and sat down like nothing happened. I asked if he confronted him, and Mike said no, he just sat a few tables away and watched for 3 hours until the guy left. "That's when I knew for sure," he said. I didn't ask what exactly he knew for sure because I didn't want to go down that road. When our food came, I noticed he barely touched his burger. He kept staring at the wall, eyes flicking up every now and then like he was tracking something invisible. I asked if he was okay, and he said, "They're always testing how people react under observation." Then he leaned in, voice low, and said, "Prove you're not one of them." I thought he was joking. I asked how I was supposed to do that, and he said, "Just tell me something only you would know." I said that didn't make sense, but he just nodded slowly like I'd confirmed something. He said I blinked too much when he asked questions. He said it was a tell. I told him maybe it was because this whole thing was freaking me out a little. He said, "Exactly what they'd say." I stood up and said maybe we should call it a night. He asked where I was going. I said I was going home. He said, "They'll follow you from here. That's how it starts." I told him I'd take my chances. He smiled, weirdly calm, and said, "I'll know if you're lying." As I walked out, I caught a reflection in the diner window. He was still sitting there, staring at the wall like he could see through it. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. He hadn't yelled or been violent, just off. But there was something about the way he said things that stuck in my head. They listen. They test people. 2 days later, he texted me, "You did good pretending." I didn't respond. The next day, another one, "They'll contact you soon." I blocked him right after that. A week later, I was at the grocery store, standing in the cereal aisle when I saw him. Same jacket, same calm expression. He didn't come over, just stood at the end of the aisle watching. I turned and walked out without buying anything. That night, there was an envelope wedged under my door. Inside was a folded piece of paper that said, "You're facing the wrong direction." No name, no signature, just that line. I moved it straight to the trash, tried not to overthink it. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering if he followed me home, or if it was a coincidence. The next morning, I checked my peephole before leaving for work. There was no one there, but taped to my door was another note, smaller this time. It said, "You didn't check the wall." That one made my stomach drop. I looked around my apartment, half expecting to find something taped somewhere. Everything looked normal, but when I walked into my living room, I noticed a faint mark on the wall across from the couch, like something had been there and then peeled off. I tried to ignore it, went to work, didn't tell anyone. But every night after that, I'd wake up once or twice and swear I heard something. Not loud, just a faint clicking sound like static. After a few days, I had enough. I called a friend who works in IT and asked him to check for any hidden devices or cameras just to be sure. He came over with a scanner, went through every corner of my apartment. Nothing, until he pointed the scanner at that same wall. It beeped. We moved the couch, and there, tucked behind an old wall outlet, was a tiny black device, about the size of a button. He said it looked like a small mic. Not professional grade, but something you could buy online. I didn't know what to do. I threw it out, changed the locks, and stopped answering unknown numbers. About a month later, I had a package, no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid. It showed the back of my head, sitting at that same diner table, facing Mike. On the back, written in blue pen, was "Not even understand." I showed it to my friend, and he said maybe it was just a prank, but I never told anyone which diner it was. I haven't been back there since. Sometimes, though, when I walk downtown at night, I'll see someone sitting alone in a booth by the wall. No phone, no food, just watching the reflections in the glass. And every time I catch that glimpse, I think about Mike's voice saying, "It's better this way." It started off like one of those nights that felt normal but a little off, like the air was too still and the sky too clear. Grace had been texting me for a few days about some guy trouble, but that wasn't new. Grace always had some drama following her around. She was the kind of person who'd call you at 2 in the morning just to ask if you believed people could be cursed. I never really knew if she was joking or if she just liked getting a reaction. That night she asked me to come over to her new place. Said she didn't want to live alone after what happened with her last boyfriend. I didn't know much about it, just that she'd been crying a lot and said he'd left suddenly. When I got there, she'd already set up this weird little arrangement in the living room. A circle of old photos spread across her coffee table like a ritual. Candles lit even though the lights were still on. Her phone was recording on the counter. I thought she was maybe filming some kind of video project or therapy thing. Then she told me what she wanted me to do. She said she had pictures of every man she'd ever dated, printed out and numbered, and she wanted me to point to the one who looked most likely to hurt her. Just like that. No explanation. No laughter after saying it. She was dead serious, sitting there with her hands folded, eyes locked on mine. I thought maybe it was some twisted game, like one of those psychology TikToks where you find out something about yourself based on your choices. I tried to laugh it off, but she didn't move. She just said, "You'll know when you see him." There were 12 pictures, each one printed on plain white paper. Some looked like regular selfies, some looked like mugshots. I recognized a few of the guys from old parties or social media posts, but most of them were strangers. I started to joke around, pointing out bad haircuts or weird smiles, but she didn't react to anything. She just stared, waiting. The air felt heavy, like the room was shrinking around the table. Halfway through, something about the photos started to bother me. Every guy looked almost the same. Brown hair, scruffy jawline, same tired look in their eyes. The only differences were their clothes or the lighting. It was like the same face had been copied over and over, just slightly changed each time. I asked her if she was messing with me, maybe editing the pictures or something, but she said they were all real. The last photo made my stomach twist. It was a picture of someone I swear I had seen before, but not in real life. It looked like me. Not exactly me, but close enough that I felt my chest tighten. Same haircut, same type of jacket I had on that night, same small scar above the eyebrow from when I fell off my bike as a kid. I laughed a little just to break the silence, told her she was trying too hard to freak me out. But she leaned forward and said she hadn't added that one. Said it showed up on its own when she printed the rest. Her voice was low, and she kept glancing at the front door like she expected someone to come in. That's when I noticed the house. I hadn't really paid attention before, but it didn't look like she had unpacked. There were boxes still sealed, clothes piled up on the floor, and one corner of the room had a mirror covered with a sheet. The smell of wax from the candles was thick, and something about it made my eyes sting. Grace started pacing, saying she'd been seeing that face everywhere. On buses, in reflections, even once in her phone's front camera. She said it wasn't me, but something that looked like me. She said she thought maybe she was the one being followed, but then her ex disappeared, and now the pictures kept changing every time she printed them. I told her she needed sleep, maybe a break from all this weird stuff. But then she picked up the photo that looked like me and asked if I'd been to her place before. I said no, but she didn't seem convinced. She said someone had been standing outside her window last week, wearing the same jacket I was wearing that night. The air went cold. I didn't know what to say. I looked around for signs of someone breaking in, maybe footprints or scratches, but the place was spotless, except for the photos. I told her to throw them out, maybe burn them, just to get them out of her head. She said she tried burning them before, but they never stayed gone. That was when she lifted one of the candle jars and pulled out a half-burnt photo from underneath it. The picture was black around the edges, but I could still make out the same face. Mine. She started crying then, quietly, like she was trying not to let it out. That every time she tried to move or start over, he found her again. I didn't even know who he was anymore. I tried to calm her down and said I'd sleep on the couch, just in case she was scared. She nodded, but didn't say anything. Around midnight, I started to drift off, but then I heard her walking around. The sound of footsteps moving slow across the floor, stopping near the table, then near the front door. I thought she was checking locks or something, but the steps sounded wrong. Too light, like she was walking barefoot on gravel. I sat up and called out her name, but she didn't answer. I looked toward the hallway and saw a shadow move across the wall. It was her shape, but the wrong height. Taller. When I went to check, the hallway was empty. Grace's bedroom door was closed, and I could hear faint whispering from inside. I pushed the door open and found her sitting on the floor, the photo spread around her again. But she wasn't talking to me. She was staring at her phone screen, whispering something to whoever was on the other end. When I looked at the phone, the screen was dark. Her eyes flicked up at me, and for a second I thought she didn't recognize me. She just smiled this weird, blank smile and asked if I'd picked one yet. I said I didn't know what she meant. She said I needed to pick which one looked most likely to hurt her. I told her I already had, that I picked the one that looked like me. She said, "Good." The lights flickered, and I swear I heard something in the walls, a scraping sound, like nails dragging behind the drywall. She stood up slow, said she didn't think it was going to stop this time. I grabbed her arm and told her we were leaving. She didn't move. Said it wouldn't matter, it always finds her. When I turned back toward the door, I saw something behind me in the reflection of the covered mirror. I hadn't realized a sheet had slipped off part of it, just enough to show the corner of the room. There was a shape standing next to me, my height, my clothes, but its face was wrong, like a stretched-out copy of mine. The mouth was open, but it wasn't saying anything. It just stood there, perfectly still, while Grace kept whispering the same word over and over. Hurt. I don't remember much after that. I read in a report later that her neighbors heard screaming, but when police came, the house was empty. They said there were photos scattered everywhere, and every single one had the same face. Mine. I moved cities after that. Changed my number. Never heard from Grace again. Sometimes I still dream about that room, about the smell of candles and the faint sound of whispering behind the walls. Once in a while, when I look through old photos on my phone, I swear I see one that I don't remember taking. Always the same face, always the same eyes, looking right back at me. I met Dave through a friend of a friend, one of those setups you agree to just to get people to stop asking why you're still single. He looked normal enough when I first saw him. Jeans, button-up shirt, messy hair that looked more like he didn't care than like he tried too hard. He smiled a lot, talked fast, and had this way of making eye contact that felt like he was studying you, not just listening. I remember thinking he seemed harmless, kind of boring even. That should have been a good thing. We met up for dinner at this small restaurant downtown, one of those cozy places with soft music and warm lighting. The kind of spot that makes people talk in low voices like they're in a movie. I got there first, sat by the window, and watched the cars slide by. When he walked in, he looked straight at me and grinned like we already knew each other. He didn't even say hi, just slid into the seat across from me and started talking like we were mid-conversation. At first, it was fine. He talked a lot about his job, how everyone around him was lazy, how he always had to pick up the slack. It got boring fast, but I didn't want to be rude. I nodded, smiled, asked questions. Normal first date stuff. The waiter came, and we ordered. Dave didn't look at the menu long, just pointed at something random, like the food didn't matter. Then he started going off about how restaurants were a scam. He said tipping was outdated, that people should just do their jobs, and not expect extra money. I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He leaned forward like he was about to give a speech, saying how paying someone more for bringing plates was ridiculous. The waiter came back to refill our water, and Dave didn't even pause his rant. He kept talking about how standards were too high, how society was weak, how service jobs should toughen up. The waiter froze mid-pour, gave a polite nod, and walked away. I wanted to crawl under the table. It went on for 20 minutes. No exaggeration. I timed it because I couldn't believe it. He compared waiters to fast food workers who expect applause for showing up. He said it with this weird smile like he thought he was enlightening me. When I finally said something, told him it was rude to talk like that in front of staff, he stared at me. Not angry, just blank. Then he smiled again and said I was too emotional about money. That's when I decided I wasn't staying for dessert. I excused myself, said I needed to use the bathroom. I stood there for a bit, staring at my reflection, trying to figure out how to leave without making it awkward. When I came back, the waiter was at the table holding the bill. Dave was still talking, his voice low but sharp. The waiter's face was pale, and I could tell something had changed. The waiter walked away fast, and Dave just sat there, tapping his fingers on the table. He looked calm, too calm. I noticed he hadn't touched his food. My plate was half empty, but his was still steaming. When I asked if everything was okay, he smiled like before and said the waiter finally understood. We left, and I thought that was it. I figured I'd text him later, say it wasn't a match, move on. But that night, I got a message from him. Just one line, "You left too early. You didn't see what he did." I didn't answer. The next morning, my phone had another message. It was a photo of the restaurant. The windows were dark, police tape stretched across the door. I thought it had to be fake, some weird joke. But when I checked the local news, there it was. A worker had been found dead in the back alley behind the restaurant. No suspect, no clear cause yet. I felt sick. I tried calling the mutual friend who introduced us, asked if she knew anything about Dave. She said she'd only met him twice, didn't even have his number anymore. She thought he was off and warned me not to hang out with him again. I deleted his texts, blocked his number, and tried to forget the whole thing. But that night, he showed up at my apartment. He knocked 3 times, slow and spaced out. I froze. Didn't move, couldn't breathe. My lights were off, so maybe he'd think I wasn't home. After a few seconds, I heard him laugh through the door. Not loud, just a soft laugh like he knew I was listening. Then silence. I waited for footsteps. None came. When I looked through the peephole, through the door viewer, I didn't see him. I waited another 5 minutes before backing away. I checked the hallway window and saw his car parked across the street. He just sat there in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel looking straight ahead. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I called the police. They said they'd send a patrol car by, but that unless he did something, there wasn't much they could do. For a while, nothing happened. A week passed. Then 2. I started to think I was paranoid, that maybe he wasn't involved in whatever happened at the restaurant. Maybe it was just bad timing. But one night, I came home from work and saw a small envelope taped to my door. No name, no address. Inside were 2 things: a napkin from the restaurant and a photo. The photo was of me sitting in that booth, taken from outside the window. I stared at it for a long time. The angle was perfect, like someone had stood on the sidewalk and waited for the right moment. I could see my reflection faintly in the glass, and behind it, barely visible, was Dave staring right at me. I packed a bag that night and stayed at a friend's place. I didn't tell her everything, just said I needed a break from my apartment. But weird things started happening there too. One night, her motion light outside kept turning on. No one there. Then a knock at 3 a.m. She looked through her window and said a man was standing on the sidewalk, just outside the light's reach. Couldn't see his face. I moved again after that. New place, new number, new everything. I didn't hear from him for months. Then last week, I got another text from an unknown number, just a photo. It was the same restaurant. The windows were still boarded up, but someone had carved something into the wood. I zoomed in, my name. I don't know how he found me. The police don't know either. They say the restaurant case is still open, but they haven't released much. I don't think they believe me when I tell them about Dave. They say there's no record of anyone by that name fitting his description. No job history, no address, nothing. Sometimes I wonder if I ever actually met him, or if he was just using someone else's identity. The mutual friend I mentioned, she doesn't remember introducing us anymore. She swears she never met him, never gave me his number. She even showed me her messages, and there's no trace of the conversation we had about him. It's like he never existed. But I still see him. Not up close, not directly. Just in passing. At the grocery store across the parking lot. Sitting in a car at the intersection. Same face, same slight smile. He doesn't wave, doesn't move. Just watches. I told myself if it happens again, I'll confront him. Get proof, something I can show the police. But every time when I blink, he's gone. 2 nights ago, I got home late and saw a note under my door. Handwritten this time. It said, "You still don't get it. Standards aren't lower, you are." There was a receipt attached. From the same restaurant. The total was $0.00. No food ordered. Just one item listed. Service charge removed. I don't eat out anymore. I don't answer unknown numbers. And sometimes when I walk by a window, I swear I see his reflection standing behind me even when I'm alone.